Okay, so welcome back. My name is Maruan and that's the last session for today before the Users Award. I would like to give you an update about the project called Apache PDFBox, which is an open source Java library. And it's the second time that we are able to talk about that project. I've been here last year, and so that's why I said an update. What I would like to cover is a little bit about how the project evolved. Then I think something Boris said in his earlier talk is about software quality and testing. As we've learned, there's only a small number of test files available, so I think I would like to outline to you how we are testing PDFBox and which files we're using, how our testbed looks like. And because it's a technical session, I would like to pick a specific topic about working with PDFs, which is appearance generation for forms, and what the specification, the PDF specification, tells us about appearance generation and how it looks like in practice, because there is a gap, and to show you some of the challenges we're facing when developing a PDF library, and I think that's a challenge for every vendor, and Boris has already talked about his challenges. Okay, let me go one back. Since last year, that was a little bit around this time, we had a number of minor releases. We're currently working on the release 1.8.10, which should be out after the summer break. And we're also working for a little more than a year now on PDFBox 2. I'll give you an outline of the major new functionalities in PDFBox 2 later. And we'll also expect that to be out in the after the summer break. So software quality, Boris already talked about Sonar. We're also using Sonar. We're using Travis, we're using Jenkins, so we're using the same tools. We're also available on GitHub, but all Apache projects, they're using Subversion, so all our Subversion repository is mirrored to GitHub, so you can access PDFBox through GitHub, which is easier for some people working with the code. So the Sonar gives us the ability to do some static code checks. For example, styling. Did we declare the variables correctly? Do we release variables? When we open a file, do we close the file, etc., etc. And we've worked a lot on software quality within the last year, and from just about 80%, we came to now 89% and something coverage or a metric. But we're still working on that, and that's a very good tool. And we're linking to that tool from our website. So if you're interested into specifics, for example, how is our font handling, how's the quality of the font handling, of the pre-flight module, which does the PDFA validation, of the parser, etc. You can drill down into that, and I think that's more interesting to people trying to use PDFBox. But it can also be very interesting for developers to see how to use such tools. So how do we test a PDF library like PDFBox? There are a number of synthetic tests. Boris talked about some of these. And what we're also doing is between the releases, we do render tests. So for all the test files we have, which are a little bit more than 250,000 files we're testing against, we're rendering between releases. And that's the render results are not publicly available because some of the test files we're using are not public files. Okay, But what we're doing is we render them with the current release and keep the render result. And as soon as we have a new release or preparing a new release, we're comparing the images from the new release to the old release. And doing that on a regular basis, or also when we do larger check-ins, we do that with specific files, not with the whole test bed. We do it with specific files. It's very easy to find differences between, for example, the rendering results. And then we need to inspect the files and see, okay, why are these changes? Of course, a change could be that we broke a functionality. The change could also be that we enhance something, so the rendering quality might be better now. And so then, if that's the case, the new test file or the new result will be our goal for the next test. We do the same together with another Apache project called TICA, which is for text extraction. We do the same together with the TICA project for text extraction. So just before releases, the TICA people, they have an own test server. We extract all the texts from all the corporate, from all our test beds, and compare the results, the metadata extraction as well as the text extraction. And again, doing this, we see are there differences for doing text extraction, because PDFBox is used in some open source libraries, for example, Jackrabbit, for doing text extraction and document indexing. And so that's a very important use case. So there's a lot of tests around text extraction. And we do PDFA validation. When I write here PDFA validation, we only do PDFA 1B. We don't cover other standards. And but we run all test files through the PDFA validation tests. Also, the test files might not be PDFA compliant. So the PDFA validation test is a stress test for the parser, and is also a test for the validator, because if you do PDFA validation and the file has a number of issues, you want to report all issues. So testing non-PDFA compliant files through the PDFA validator ensures that we pick up all failures when we do that validation. So over the time, we collected a number of specific files from customers through our issue management system. During last year, we saw that only testing through these specific customer files only gave us a certain test coverage, especially when we did render tests and PDFA validation tests. So we were looking out for an enhanced test bed, and we're taking the ESATOR and the Bavaria corpus files. ESATOR is from the PDF Association, Bavaria, that's from PDFlib. These files were specifically created for PDFA validation. So these are the files we're using for PDF validation as well as all the other tests. And then, because of an initiative in the US, there is a website called Digital Corpora. And that initiative, what they did was they started collecting files from government agencies. Word files, Excel files, PowerPoint presentation, videos, and PDFs. And these are publicly available, and we picked all the PDF files. These are a little bit more than 300,000 files. And we're using these on a regular basis and running all of our tests through these 230,000 files. And very new to us is the Vera PDF files, so thank you, Boris. And I I think we have one or two issues now with the Vera PDF files. So we're working on fixing our pre-flight module with these newer tests. Yeah. So I think from a software quality or from a testing perspective, I think we now have a very good test coverage for all the various aspects. And as I said, the main tests we're doing are rendering, text extraction, and PDFA 1B validation. So over, as I said, a little more than a year, we're working on PDFBox 2. And these are some of the, let's say, major topics around PDFBox 2. One thing is we now have improved font support and improved font handling for rendering. The PDFBox project is quite some years old, and what we saw was that there are some there was some lack in functionality, for example, in Unicode handling. That was for text extraction. That was for generating new PDFs. For example, when you generated a new PDF using PDFBox, you couldn't use the Unicode character set, which is a pity if you're outside of, let's say, US ASCII and a little more. So we now have full Unicode handling for text extraction, for rendering. A lot of functionality went into improved rendering. We didn't have transparency support. We now have transparency support. The handling of patterns has been very much improved, clippings, etc. Because we saw that a number of users are using PDFBox to either render PDF into image data, or what some companies are also doing is they have a custom Java drawing and use PDFBox to convert from PDF, to example, to PCL or AFP. And so PDFBox needed to render the PDF as closely as possible to give all the other, let's say, into image formats or other formats, as much information as possible to ensure that the resulting document looks like the PDF document. I wouldn't say that we have the same quality as, for example, Adobe Acrobat or some other libraries in some edge cases, but we're very close now. And as I said, there are only some edge cases where we're still working on improving, mainly around patterns. Unicode support for PDF creation, I talked about it. As I said, with the 1.8 release stream, you're not able to, for example, produce PDFs using Chinese or Arabic, etc. With PDFBox 2, you're able to produce PDFBox or new PDF documents using these languages. If you already have a PDF, a Chinese PDF, you can handle that already with the 1.8. So it's about generating new documents. With the enhanced test bed we introduced last year, there came a number of parser improvements. The Corpora test bed I talked about, 330,000 files. When we started running these through our parser, there were a little more than 100 files we couldn't process. We're now down to a little around 35 files we can't process. And these files are so badly damaged that, for example, Adobe Reader can't read them. Yeah? I think it's very important, if you look at PDF parsing, and I think that was a topic last year, is that you have the PDF specification, and on the other hand, you have PDFs generated in the real world. And there is a gap. not all PDFs generated in the real world are 100% matching the specification. And there are a lot of workarounds, for example, in Adobe Reader and Adobe Acrobat. So people using PDF files expect that a PDF library can handle all these files. So typically people say, okay, if I can read it in Reader, I expect PDFBox and other libraries to handle that PDF file. Also, that PDF might not be standards compliant. So a lot of these additional tests helped us identifying such files and coming very close to putting all these workarounds in, which are hidden in Reader, Acrobat, and other software. And I think we're very close to handling all these files now. Other than that, we have improved Acroform support. So if you look at PDFBox for filling out your forms, the filling of Acroforms will be much better now, especially appearance generation. I will talk about it later. We have improved annotation support. There was a limited list of annotations we support in the 1.8 release. We now support all the standard annotations, PDF standard annotations in PDFBox 2. And there were a number of enhancements in document signing. And for all these major additions, we also have samples. So you have sample signing, for example, PDFs with time-based signatures. We have samples for annotations. We have samples for example, for rendering. And we added a number of samples for developers who, for example, want to have their own custom rendering. So we have what's called a custom page drawer. So when we render a PDF, there's a page drawer, taking all the objects on that page and drawing it. And we have a custom page drawer, and you can extend that custom page drawer and, for example, say, okay, I want to have a special handling for annotations or forms or text, or when I process text, I would like to know which position that text is at on that page, etc. Okay, so a number of improvements for developers. And PDFBox 2 also has a cleaner API. Because it's a major release, we took that chance and cleaned up the API. So it has a cleaner API. Just to give you a little metric, there are around 1,000 issues we had. We were working on with PDFBox 2. We're now down to around 24 issues. So we're close to having all issues resolved. And as I said, we're planning a release after the summer break, maybe a beta before. We haven't decided on that yet. But we get a lot of demand for PDFBox 2, so we build regular snapshots. So there are snapshot releases, and these snapshots releases are fully functional. Apart from these open issues, they don't have any open issues. Okay. Okay, so a little more specific into challenges implementing some of the PDF capabilities. One topic I picked is the appearance generation for forms, and the same is true for appearance generation for annotations, etc. Okay. So the sample I have here is a form field with different alignments, text, and different borders. All these borders are the standard borders that form has been developed using Adobe Acrobat. So we were using some of the properties, border, etc. And then we started entering some text to look at the result and said, okay, what is the result Adobe Acrobat is generating when a user fills out that form? because typically the user expects the same result when you fill out the form programmatically using a Java library or some other library. Might it be PDFBox or iText or whatever. Okay? And what you can see is that if you look at the borders, if you look at the left aligned fields, if you look at the borders, the gap between the border and the text is dependent on the border thickness. Okay? What you can also see is that, for example, if I have a line in the middle and my text starts to be larger than, or is clipped, or the length of the text is larger than the field, it has the same result as left aligned. Okay? Same for right aligned. Okay? What you can see here is that clipping here and here and here is exactly the same clipping. Okay? And then with some edge cases, what we did was we said, okay, we grow the font size and have larger borders, and what you see, if that text would go into the border, it shifted up. Okay, so these are the results we have with Adobe Acrobat. Similar, if you look at multi-line text, again you see that there is some gap here, there's some padding here, and so that's what we're trying to achieve using PDFBox. So what does the specification tell about how to deal with that situation? There's a lot of information around generating the appearance stream. For example, the conforming reader shall then, if there's some text, replace the existing contents with appearance stream from begin marked content to matching end marked content. So that's typically where the text resides. Okay? Who's familiar with these terms? Okay, some. So if we look at a field, let's go back quickly. That field, align left field without any text. If you look at the PDF content generated for that field, or with that small border around it, the information, the appearance stream for that field, that's the information you have in there. Who's familiar with the term appearance stream? Okay, so if you have a form field, okay, there are two types of information. If you fill in if you have form data, you have the form field holding the form data, and on the other hand, you have a visual representation on the page, which you can see and you can print, etc. And that's defined by the appearance stream. Okay, and if you have that field defined in Adobe Acrobat and you don't have any data, that's the only information you have as a starting point to enter your additional information. Okay? After filling out that form, it has to look like this. Okay? That's clipped a little bit because the text was too long. You see that the upper information about the border, that small border around the form field, that's still existing. And then you have that marked content, and here is the text. Together with some font specification, which font to use, and what's very important here, the position of the text. But nowhere in the specification does it tell you how to position that text. There is no information about, oh, well, I use some padding. Okay, that padding is dependent on the size of the border, etc. So the old, yeah.
It's even worse. The baseline changed in different versions of Acrobat. So if you have one version of Acrobat, the text is there,
yeah.
and another version of text is
yeah.
there.
Yeah. That looks different in another version of Adobe Acrobat. Yeah. So as I said, the issue we're facing is that as a user, you expect us to generate the same appearance, the same look and feel you would get from Adobe Acrobat and Adobe Reader, which might change from version to version. Not dramatically, but changes a little bit. Yeah. But in the PDF specification, there are only, let's say, a very rough outline of how the process looks like. For example, this information comes from the default appearance. So what it's saying is, okay, look in the default appearance, that's a string, and in that default appearance, at least you need to have that TF operator, which tells you which font resource to use and which font size. And it might have some other operators. And that needs to be copied into the appearance stream. Okay? But it doesn't tell you anything about clipping, it doesn't tell you anything about text positioning, etc. So the only way you can deal with that is generate test files, okay? Create a form from scratch, fill it out, use some edge cases, and find out that, hey, there's some padding applied to the text content. And that padding, for example, is dependent on the border thickness. So in order to come up with that type of information, or with that type of information, you have to find out that text which is longer than the text field will be left aligned, padding will be reduced. So if you have the normal padding here, that will be reduced until it doesn't match, and then there will be another special case. And as I said, if text doesn't fit, it will be aligned to the bottom. So the bounding box, so if you have the font, that will be like this. So the bounding box of the font will be there. So the bottom of the bounding box will be at the edge of that border. Okay? So that's a very quick outline of challenges implementing a PDF library. Questions?
Yeah, is it a good idea to... So Acrobat, Adobe, there are bugs. For instance, if you have two multi-line text fields and the borders overlap, the scroll bar disappears.
Yes.
So that's clearly a bug, because
yes.
You can't... So, but is it a good idea to mimic the bugs?
I don't think it's a good idea to mimic the bugs, but I think it's a good idea to mimic the regular behavior. And now the question is, what's a regular behavior? If you look at this, we really try to match that. Okay, because I think that's a standard behavior. Also, it's not documented. Okay. There might be cases where it's very difficult to find out what happens, especially in a non-interactive application. You wouldn't have a scroll bar. So the fact that if there is a scroll bar, it looks different to the fact if there's no scroll bar. So for example, if you enter the field and the field has focus, the scroll bar is there. If you go outside the field, the scroll bar is gone. We try to replicate the behavior without the scroll bar, because with our library there wouldn't be any interaction. Yeah.
But so next year we hope that PDF 2.0 will be there, but we're already thinking ahead about PDF 3.0 or PDF 3.0 or what comes after PDF 3.0. And there's an ad hoc work group within ISO to specifically look at acroforms and to look at everything that is missing and to kind of rewrite that for what comes after PDF 2.0. So feel free to join, because I think for the moment there are only 5 people.
Yeah, it didn't make it. I made a small suggestion to add a little more content for PDF 2 around that, but it didn't make it into the spec.
Yeah, I think it was too late in the process.
Yeah, I know. It was review stage.
One thing that was added was if you have a form field and you submit something to a server, the server has no idea whatsoever of the encoding. So if you add Chinese glyphs, you could interpret them as big file or GBK or as Unicode. And those are two different, it's two Chinese glyphs, but you don't know which one of the two. And that will be added to ISO 2002, but the rest is part of an idea.
So, as I said, the maybe that with what we just saw for forms, the same is true for annotations. So annotations are if you do commenting, and there are different types of annotations. The same is true for annotations, and for annotations it's even a little worse, because for annotations we have annotation handlers. And it's in the specification that PDF software can decide to use their handler. So so from that perspective, the PDF specification is a suggestion how to render that annotation, but it's not a must-have. So if you look at a PDF, for example, in Mac Preview and in Adobe Reader and in Foxit, it might look different. So annotations, you can't count on the visual appearance of that annotation in different PDF software. Further comments, question?
Do you have in your test files Office files like Excel?
Pardon?
Do you have in your test files files like Microsoft Office?
No. Your PDF library, not an Office.
It's only PDF.
Yes. So the corporate test suite or the corporate files we're using, as I said, these are around 1 million files, and from these files, 230,000 are PDFs. These are the ones we're using. Yeah. So, but if you have, if you're interested in Excel test files, etc., there will be a lot. And video files and.
But Excel files are the biggest problem for archives. Because you have areas which are defined to print. You have several tabs, and how the Excel works, you define which material you like to print out, and it works in a similar way. You can define, of course, that I like to have everything. Still, you have only those cells, information from those cells, which is what you can see, not what is behind. And that is the reason why we really need PDF A3 to put that Excel file inside the same package.
Yeah, but then you would have a visual. So, but what you have is you have the Excel file, you have the PDF generator from that Excel file, and that original Excel file will be
That's the only way to do it.
Yeah. There is an Apache library called POI for dealing with Office files. So it gives you some information about Excel files, like printer margins, etc. defined, but it wouldn't be able to render it for you.
You mentioned you use a tool for code security. Can you identify which?
No, I didn't say I'm using a tool for code security.
Did you say you're doing code checks? So that, and you had 89%, you covered 89% of your code with your code check?
Yes, that's a static code analysis.
Okay.
Called,
Oh, I'm sorry, just interpret that
Yeah,
with the
yeah.
security.
Yeah.
So,
We're not using code checks or code signing. We could use code signing, but we're not using it. But the Apache, let's say the mother or the community, they provide several services to the individual projects. So we could use code signing, but we're not using it because up to now there wasn't a request for it.
okay.
So you just mentioned the corporate testifier, right? That testify is available, everybody can use, or just
That's a public. That's publicly available. Yes. Digitalcorpora.org, I think.
digital
.org.
For your information, we use some security check for the code. It's called the async and the nsync. It's from the Google open source side.
If you mean security checks like assignment of variables, etc., that's part of the code analysis.
Right.
The code
That's-
signing,
I
like
didn't mean
you
the
sign a
signing, but
package,
the-
that's
and
not
actually
something.
checking the code for leaks and.
Yeah, that's
making sure
something
that-
we're doing. That's
Yeah.
something we're doing.
Okay.
Further questions? So thank you very much. I think, yeah, I'm a little ahead of time. So I think you can use it for a small coffee break, and then it's over to the Users Award, I think. Yeah. Thank you very much.